There is this whole body of knowledge, whole body of thought. I don't want to call it tradition because that's not a tradition, it's only a part, a facet that unless the ego is slayed, there is very little progress can be made in spiritual unfoldment, in spiritual endeavors, on the path towards realization of one's ultimate reality. So let's look into it a little bit. There is also this understanding that you hear, and some of you, I'm sure, have came across or maybe will come across at some point when you read literature, when you read spiritual literature, some expositions on some commentaries on scriptures and what have you, that essentially the I has to go, right? Because that I is that what arrests consciousness or what localizes our awareness at the expense of freedom. But there is also this view that the I has to go. Whether that's true or not, or whether that is absolutely true or not, because perhaps that is true at some point. Perhaps there is this experience when temporarily we undergo that process where that whole conglomerate, that whole structure is being dismantled. And what I would like to invite you here tonight is to view two very different perspectives, which we will work with both. We will try to reconcile it. One of these perspectives is where the I simply stands for that which is eternal, unchangeable. It never goes because it never came. We can even interpret various other scriptures and various other spiritual traditions through this understanding. And to me, for instance, it seems very handy to look into the teachings of Christ and the teachings that are present in Christianity, in that esoteric dimension of Christianity. And especially that which is being summarized in the line, right? Which belongs to, I think that belongs to the Moses, that I am that I am. Remember that line? I am that I am. In other words, it's a double confirmation. I am not so and so. I am not this and that. I am that I am. In other words, this reaffirmation, this statement, reinstating the very, very important tenet of Tantric Kashmir Shaiva tradition on the centrality of I. And it might sound confusing for some of you, but let's have a little bit of a leap of faith here. We will go back and go back again and cover this territory. Essentially, there is only I. There's only I. Doesn't matter how and what comes as the actual experience. But that I, it's literally the I-ness and the centrality of our awareness, of our consciousness. In other words, to make it sound more accessible, whether I'm thinking that I'm this little puny being, this temporal, this insignificant, what have you, right? With my limited joys and sorrows, creature, or I'm this, great, superior, supreme, universal, godlike being. It's the same. The I, that what characterizes and that what really outlines my status. But everything that comes next to it is simply that which molds my understanding of my nature. In other words, this understanding, this platform of understanding is such that self-realization is realization of precisely that. A total identity, complete and total identity with that principle of I amness, of I-ness. That whoever I thought myself to be, I am. Doesn't matter what comes next to it. The core of my being is that. The very core, the essence of my being is that. Some of you may ask, so how does that sit? So how does that relate to ego thing? Well, you see, because ego is also that instrumentality of consciousness. It's that my, so to speak, temporal identity, isn't it not? Right?
It's created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that whatever that I say, that that I identify with that, and whatever comes with that, what comes with that? With that comes story, right? I was born somewhere, to some parents, in some country, with some friends, with some surroundings, right? I grew up there, I speak some language, I have some people who I call friends, right? I went to this school, to that school, to this university, to that university, or I didn't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I did. There is the story that supports that I'm so and so. This story supports this temporal character. This temporal character is supported by the fact that there is memory, that there is this recollection, and that I know that this happened to me and not to you. It was I who was born in Central Asia, not you. So how does that all relate to this? You see that this is the only understanding you need to make from the standpoint of view of the ultimate teaching of direct recognition. The one and the only understanding. But it's so radical that most people cannot do that. Most people cannot do that because simply that something holds that fictitious I temporarily to a degree where it is inconceivable that I could be that which is beyond of anything that is manifested. That I am eternal, immortal, pure consciousness, pure awareness. In other words, I am Paul, I am Vince, right? I am Monica, I am Bettina, and so forth. I am Emma, I am Barbara, right? and all these stories, all these characters that live there. But the core of my identity is that I am aware. I have always been aware. That's the core of my identity, the core of my being. It never came here, it does not have birth and birth certificate, and it doesn't go anywhere. So in other words, the very, very leap, a quantum leap of understanding isn't that. It's immediate realization. Immediate. It cannot be, oh, let me figure it out. Because as soon as you say, let me figure it out, forget about it. It's just as immediate as fire, a flash of lightning. It has to stun you, literally, stun you completely. That this I, it's all there is, that I have always existed as this I, and everything that comes next to this I is a fictitious character, a role I am playing here as consciousness. A role. This is the definition of Leela, a play of consciousness. But the core of my identity is I. This I is irreplaceable. It does not go anywhere, cannot go anywhere. It has no beginning, no end. Whether you say to yourself, I am a miserable little thing, totally ignorant, or I am Shiva, or I am of the nature of ultimate reality, it's the same thing, absolutely the same thing. It makes no difference. The difference only applicable to the reference point. Can you hear that? Do you understand that the difference only is the reference point? Where do we refer that to? What is our reference point? From the standpoint of view of supreme identity, that's the only identity I've always had. Everything else comes and goes. But something happened, and the intensity of this story, the intensity of this grip is too powerful. Don't get me wrong. Don't even begin to start feeling guilty now deep inside. How come I cannot overcome that? What happens? Why? Maybe logically it all makes sense, but somehow it doesn't make me feel omnipotent, omnipresent. That's why in a tradition, and various traditions say, the ocean is arrested in a drop. It's literally, that's what it is. It's ocean. The whole entire ocean of consciousness is being arrested in a drop. That's what it is. So let's speak a little bit about this mechanics. So what is actually happening? But as I said, we are introducing two different standpoints, stand views. This view is that universal identity. It's your universal identity.